Since besting Texas A&M back in September, Alabama fans have been waiting for that LSU matchup. But who knows? Maybe Tennessee will provide a bit of a bump in the road. The Vols are playing much better as of late. Roll Tide as they go to 7-0. The Vols at 4-3, and we bring in Tide 99.1 Ben George to talk about the Crimson Tide and the Vols getting it on in Tuscaloosa. Hey, Ben.
What's going on, Mark? How you doing, bud?
I'm doing just fine. So, when I was down south covering SEC football, this used to be a really good one. Obviously, the Tide has dominated this series with 6 consecutive wins in recent years. Tennessee with a nice win, certainly the best that Butch Jones has been able to muster here in a short tenure at Tennessee. They're coming off with some momentum after upsetting South Carolina. So, possibly a game for Alabama.
That's what some people think. I don't think so. I think Vegas has it pretty accurate with about 26.5, 27. I think this game would have been a joke for most people had Tennessee lost last week. So does one game change that? Maybe a little bit, but not enough for Alabama fans to be too concerned about it.
Just looking at some of the nuts and bolts matchups across each side of the ball, Tennessee obviously makes most of its offense generated by the ground game. The offensive line is very experienced, very talented. Rayshon Neal's a fine running back facing an Alabama front that's not giving up anything. Even the Texas A&M game, most of that was made through the air. So Brandon Ivory and company giving up about 92 yards per game, but if Tennessee's able to do anything, you would think that they would have to push out the front seven.
Yeah, that's probably their strongest aspect of their game. But I mean, honestly, Mark, you look at all the other units, they're all pretty average or below average. I mean, I guess they've started to come around, so you have to look at kind of how they're trending. But if you look at the whole body of work this year, it's a very average Tennessee team. They're in the bottom half of pretty much every statistical category. But if there's one spot we're going to look at, sure, the running game. Neal and Lane, they got 2 good backs that can both run the ball effectively, and they have to because Worley's not, he's not a special quarterback at this point. So, that's going to be the one aspect where they can maybe gain a little ground and a little momentum against Alabama. But on the other side, Alabama's rush defense has been stout again. They went against the good Arkansas running game last week, gave up 180-ish yards, but they didn't really gash them at all. Didn't really get anything going too much. So while that's probably the strong point for Tennessee, it's also a strength for Alabama, and there's a lot more talent on the crimson and white than there is with that orange color of theirs.
And you mentioned Justin Worley. I think people trying to find a way for Tennessee to possibly be an upset factor in this game point to him throwing for 275 yards. It was his best effort of the season, but still below 50% against South Carolina at 23-48 and threw 2 interceptions in the game. So he has to come a long way. This would have to be a huge breakout game for him. He's progressing, but still will probably be overmatched in this game. Looking at the running game for Alabama, on the other hand, going way back to the Virginia Tech opener, there were certainly struggles in that game. It took a couple weeks for the ground game to get going. They posted 352 yards against Arkansas last week, 210 average. So Alabama's slowly creeping up the national rankings in regards to rushing yardage per game. They're now 25th in the country, back to where they expect to be with T.J. Yeldon and Kenyan Drake. So size up the running game, and with Drake almost a co-starter of sorts now.
Yeah, I think a co-starter is a pretty accurate way to put it. He's producing as much or more than Yeldon is at this point. Yeldon's still a more physical back, will run over a guy, run through defenders. But Drake, man, that guy has home run potential every time he touches the ball. He's had some electric plays this year. And he's a guy with speed that Alabama really hasn't had too much of. I mean, they've had some pretty fast guys and pretty fast running backs, but this guy is that next level speed. He's good around the corner when you think you have an angle on him, and he's gone in no time. And he showed that off in the last game. And the other guy to really keep an eye on now, if you stuck around, Mark, I don't know if you're one of those guys that Nick Saban has a problem with that, flipped the channel, midway third quarter and went to one of the other games. But if you stuck around to the last minute and a half, Derrick Henry, the running back that's had all the hype that we haven't seen a whole lot of yet, got some carries in that game and broke one for 85 yards. And where basically he had two defenders that looked like they had the angle on him. He went right around them and then outran them down the sideline. And the guy's 6'3", 240. It's really unfair if this guy kind of figures it out. If he can get his pass blocking up to par for Nick Saban, if they can add that third running back there, that's what they've had in previous years. That third freshman that provides 5, 6, 7 carries, but has that touchdown potential every time he touches it. This team could get really tough really quickly.
If Nick Saban has checked out his schedule recently, there hasn't been reason for me to be around for the first quarter. I don't think it's much of a surprise to anyone, and especially you, that I haven't watched Alabama play it down since the Texas A&M game. Only the highlights. I'm waiting for LSU. Maybe I get interested in this game if it's a 2-score game in the fourth quarter. Maybe I check in on the fourth quarter, but especially with the slate of college football games last week, Alabama was not on the radar. I just keep marking up another win and waiting for a decent opponent to come up. So hopefully that's LSU probably in a couple weeks. Looking at the rest of the offense, Amari Cooper obviously broke out as a freshman with 11 touchdowns receiving, 59 receptions, 1,000 yards. Only 15 catches this year. He's been nicked up a bit, but at the same time, can we attribute his lack of production solely to his health, or is there any other factor there?
I think that's got to be the primary problem up to this point. I don't see any reason why when he's 100% he won't have that same production. I mean, look, they've had some other options to throw the ball to. Christian Jones has been a great playmaker for them at receiver. Kevin Norwood has been the most consistent receiver they've had for a couple of years, a big catch guy. They have a lot of weapons they can get the ball to at this point. And then O.J. Howard, the true freshman tight end, who scored his first touchdown last game as well, the ceiling is through the roof for him. So there's a lot more weapons there for A.J. And you know, guys were keying on Amari early on, plus the injuries. But now I think things have opened up. There's not really one guy you can focus on at this point. Amari Cooper is, I don't know if he's all the way back 100%, but he's as close as he's been since the beginning of the year. So with him back, I fully expect him to kind of pick it up now. You can kind of see him getting separation from defenders in that Arkansas game where he was wide open a few times, and then A.J. found him. They're starting to make that connection again. So I fully believe that this second half of the season, should he stay healthy, that he'll have that impact that he had the second half of the year last year. And if you remember, it was a Tennessee game last year. Really had his coming out party, a huge game in that one. So you might see the same thing here again this Saturday.
Unlike the Tide, I'm not exactly on my game right now. I'm jumping all over the place. I'm going to go back to defense.
Bring it.
Of course, you lost Vinnie Sunseri. I know I can bring it with you. I'm not going to throw you a curveball that you can't handle. So you're going to foul off the 3-2 pitch every time and then find one that you can lay into. So Vinnie Sunseri, you lose him for the season, knee injury. He's out. Landon Collins taking his place, a player that had filled in for Ha-Ha Clinton Dix, who was earlier suspended. Probably not going to show up this game, but looking down the road specifically at Mettenberger throwing to Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr., do you expect this Vinnie Sunseri loss to be bigger down the road?
I mean, it's a guy that you don't want to lose. I mean, we talked about, I don't know if we talked about it specifically. I know we've talked about it at Tide991.com a lot. Vinnie Sunseri was the only guy on this defense, the only guy on the Alabama team that was recognized by pretty much every outlet at the midseason for being a first-team All-American. He was the only guy that made ESPN and CBS's list. Not even C.J. Mosley was on both, which I think that's more of a mistake by CBS than it is a testament to Vinny. But that just shows you how much of an impact he's had this year. He's been the most dependable guy on that defense outside of C.J. And he knows football. He's a smart, instinctual guy. He can get to the ball. He's always in on a play. I think that's what they're going to miss the most. It's not the athleticism per se, because Landon Collins probably is a better athlete, the guy that's going to replace him. But it's just the instincts and the knowledge of the defense. He's another coach out there, and he's always in on the play. You can't replace that, but they do have other talented guys, and like I said, guys that are probably more athletic than Vinny that are coming in to replace him. But he will be a loss, I think, when they hit maybe not the LSU game as much, but if they do go against a team that, in say, a national championship, if it gets to that point, like an Oregon or a Baylor, should they go crazy on everyone. They're going to need that extra defender that knows what's going on, and they're going to need that extra body. So I think it could be bigger there, but it's going to be a loss, absolutely. But the schedule is very manageable without him.
I don't know what we would do if Baylor makes the BCS championship game. Don't even bring that up.
I have to at least mention it, Mark, because they are scoring 75 points a game. Okay, and I know everybody loves offense. You, thankfully, are not one of those guys that get caught up in the offensive statistics. Like maybe the selection committee, they put a big value on offense, they said, in their press conference early on. But you got to mention them. But I also don't feel they're going to make it.
Yeah, they're one of the 15 or 20 best teams in the country. They are not in the top 5 or 10.
Right.
That said, you've got some interesting stuff on Tide991.com right now for the hardcore football fans. You talk about the Alabama defense taking a bit of a knock from the people really not zeroed in on Alabama football because they haven't played anybody of note. But still, for those teams like Arkansas and Kentucky that are struggling but still scoring, especially Kentucky scoring some points against teams like South Carolina, nothing basically against Alabama. So the defense has been rock solid. Also have an interesting piece where an Auburn fan giving the rival a little love there, I see, with the Auburn fan getting some Iron Bowl tickets and also Roll Tide painted on the Tennessee Rockin' Necks in Knoxville.
Yeah, there's some pretty good content online right now. That rock happened earlier this week. It got painted over pretty quickly. We had mixed reactions. Some people thought it was classless. And it was funny seeing some of the websites and media outlets putting vandalized in the headline, considering that rock gets painted every day by whoever wants to step up there and paint it. So vandalized is a bit of a stretch. And to give the Auburn fans some love. It was a cool reaction video. It reminded us of that BCS National Championship game the Alabama fan, the dad, got tickets to. I know we saw it on ESPN a lot over the holidays a couple of years back. But the defense I thought was a pretty cool look into what they've accomplished because, like you said, nobody's giving them a whole lot of credit at this point. They don't speak on. They're starting to a little bit more, but they haven't spoken about this defense in terms of historical defenses for Alabama and up to the level of Nick Saban. But look what they've done. I mean, I went back and 16 points over a 5-game stretch now. Like you said, offenses haven't been great, but Ole Miss has scored points. Kentucky, Arkansas. And no other team that I could look back on had a better 5-game stretch or as good of a 5-game stretch as they have. And they gave up 42 points, Mark, against A&M in September. Before November even arrives, they're the number 1 scoring defense in the country. So to be able to do that and then to recover that way and get back where they were is a testament to what these guys have accomplished. And look, I fully expect them to go out and give up less than 10 points again this weekend. I don't really see that being a threat unless a big play or a big turnover happens. So that number is going to keep going down at this point. And you've seen the schedule. Mississippi State probably is going to have a lot of issues scoring on them. Chattanooga, LSU is the big threat, and then Auburn. So I expect by the end of this season for them to be right back on top of the defensive statistics across the board.
And to emphasize 2 points, one that you made, one that I made, is that, sure, Alabama is dominating lesser foes. But Arkansas, Kentucky, especially when you talk about Ole Miss, not necessarily a lesser foe, one of the top 25, 30 teams in the country, these teams are scoring against other defenses in the SEC at a 20 to 25-point clip per game and basically getting nothing against Alabama. The other thing is after Texas A&M hit the Tide with a 14 spot early in the game, it got to 42-21. Alabama completely dominated that game from mid-first quarter to early fourth quarter defensively. 1 touchdown.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. So, and take away that fumble by Yeldon, they probably take 2 touchdowns off the board as well, and it's a 28-point game. It's not nearly as awful as it looks. I mean, they still give up a lot of yards, but a lot of those yardage came late in the game, that 95-yard touchdown pass. So it was a little misleading, but it still happened, and Manziel's a great quarterback. They have a great offense there, so it's not that huge of an issue. They've obviously proved that was more of a fluke for Alabama's defense, and more of a testament to A&M than it was to what kind of quality of athletes and players they have right now in this unit.